It was a setup. I got to convince somebody in Junior Mafia who has the power to move big. But now D-Rock is in the hands of Damien himself. That did for that whole day. But what I did was I incorporated an ironic satire, portraying Biggie as Jesus, D-Rock as Judas, Puffy as the devil, and Luz and Junior Mafia as the disciples. As we started doing a lot of shows, Biggie would say, "Yo, you know what? I became a part of the show. What if the people you trusted most, the ones you'd ride or die for, turned out to be the same ones plotting your downfall?" That's the chilling question hanging over the legacy of Biggie Smalls, a hip hop icon whose untimely death is still shrouded in controversy. He had no business in Lay at that time. We all knew that. Why would Puff rent studio time? Come on, man, you've got to look at what people do. Imagine your best friend, someone you've shared dreams, struggles, and triumphs with, being accused of playing a role in the conspiracy that ended your life. It sounds like the stuff of nightmares, right? Well, that's the story some believe unfolded with Biggie and his longtime friend D-Rock. Whispers of betrayal are allegedly tied to none other than Diddy. Over the years, Diddy's former bodyguard, Gan Deal, has added fuel to this fiery speculation, dropping bombshell claims that D-Rock was bribed by Diddy to betray Biggie. But what I did was I incorporated an ironic satire, portraying Biggie as Jesus, D-Rock as Judas, Puffy as the devil, and Luz and Junior Mafia as the disciples. And it doesn't stop there. Gene also pointed fingers at other close associates like Lil C for allegedly hiding the truth about what went down that fateful night. Wild claims, sure, but the dots people have tried to connect make it all seem eerily plausible. After Biggie's death, D-Rock and Diddy's relationship took center stage, raising eyebrows across the industry. Biggie, Notorious Lil' Kim, D-Rock, and others became subjects of intense scrutiny. Clips and photos began circulating showing D-Rock consistently by Diddy's side, making it hard to ignore the whispers of a deeper, darker connection. To top it all off, D-Rock launched a clothing brand called the Invisible Bully Swag, supposedly dedicated to Biggie. But the twist? Did he actively help promote it? Man, D-Rock got this clothing line. Tell him about it. Invisible is just pure inspiration, man. You know what I mean? Pure inspiration. Rock with this right now. It's for the underdog. You know, everybody's invisible. Invisible, you can achieve the possible. You know, we got different things going on. This is definitely something. I appreciate all the love for everybody that reps Biggie. You know, he got this one. This one's the prey one for many. This felt like a slap in the face. A bizarre twist in a saga already dripping with suspicion and heartbreak. Let's not forget Biggie and D-Rock weren't just friends, they were inseparable, performing together and navigating the gritty streets of Brooklyn as a unit. He had that on since he got it. I got it a while ago. That's what makes the rumors of Rock's involvement so devastating. It shook the industry and left fans grappling with what could be the ultimate betrayal. So, what's Rock's own story? Let's dive right in. Damon D. Rock Butler is one of those names that echoes through hip hop lore, not just as a friend or a figure in the background, but as someone who played a deeply personal and pivotal role in the life and legacy of the notorious B.I.G., aka Christopher Wallace. You can't really talk about Biggie's story without weaving D-Rock into the narrative because their bond was more than just a friendship, it was a brotherhood that started in the streets of Brooklyn, grew through shared struggles and ambitions, and eventually played out on the grand stage of hip-hop history. These two weren't just collaborators under Junior Mafia or Bad Boy Records, they were inseparable, sharing moments that ranged from mundane daily life to the chaotic rise of stardom. This deep connection is something D-Rock immortalized through hours of raw behind-the-scenes footage, capturing Biggie as Christopher Wallace, the man behind the icon. These clips, which stayed locked away for decades, offer an unfiltered look at Biggie laughing, rhyming, and just being himself wandering through malls packed with screaming fans, spitting bars on street corners, and commanding sold-out shows. D-Rock held on to this footage like a private treasure, calling it his visual diary. It wasn't until over 20 years later that he finally decided to share it with the world. This decision, spurred by meeting filmmaker M.T. Malloy, birthed Biggie, I Got a Story to Tell, a Netflix documentary that peels back the layers of Biggie's persona to reveal the man many fans never really knew. As we were starting to do a lot of shows, to the point where Biggie would say, "Yo, you know what? I became a part of the show." Biggie, Notorious Little Kim, D-Rock, and others were making significant strides. First of all, I want to just thank everybody for making Notorious such a successful movie. That's like 24 million the first 4-day weekend. If you haven't seen it, go see it. Oh, it's up to 31 million right now. Yo, we just want to say thank you, man. Thank you. See this brother behind me. It's a side of Biggie that's more Christopher Wallace than Notorious B.I.G., as his former manager Wayne Barrow pointed out, reminding us that Biggie never saw himself as a celebrity, and he never let that fame change him. But as touching as the story of their friendship and loyalty seems on the surface, there's a darker, more tangled narrative that's been whispered in corners of the hip hop world for years. One that paints D-Rock not just as a loyal friend, but as a possible betrayer. Gene Deal, a former bad boy bodyguard, has been vocal about a version of events that casts a shadow over D-Rock's role in Biggie's life and tragic death. Deal's allegations are heavy to say the least. He's likened the situation to a biblical betrayal, calling D-Rock Judas, Biggie Jesus, and Diddy the devil like figure pulling the strings. But what I did was I incorporated an ironic satire, portraying Biggie as Jesus, D-Rock as Judas, Puffy as the devil, and Luz and Junior Mafia as the disciples. It's the kind of theory that sounds almost too wild to be true. But in the murky world of hip-hop rivalries, industry politics, and the infamous East Coast-West Coast beef, nothing feels completely out of the realm of possibility. Deal claims that Biggie, in his final days, was trying to distance himself from Diddy, suspecting that things weren't as they seemed. He recounted moments of eerie forewarning, like a chilling phone call urging the crew to vest up on the night Biggie was off. The call, Deal says, was ignored by Diddy and others. I'm like, yo, Rockman, I'm getting a lot of my man called me unique. We just talked about unique. Who started that battle rap up there? Something and all me audio, mecha audio, hum. So that's where all the orders and everything they know everything before we know. And he's out in California, Deal recounts. He says, yo, Big Gene, I said, yo, who this? He say, unique, vest up. The narrative gets even murkier when you consider the tense atmosphere of the East Coast versus West Coast feud, a rivalry that had already claimed Tupac's shocker and loomed ominously over Biggie's camp. Deal suggests that there were deeper, more sinister layers to Biggie's death, pointing to betrayals from within and raising questions about loyalty, manipulation, and industry power plays. For those who might not be up to speed on the East Coast-West Coast feud, let's hit rewind and unpack how this volatile rivalry became a defining chapter in hip-hop history. This wasn't just about music or bragging rights. It was a clash of egos, regions, and ideologies that turned deadly. For Biggie, caught in the eye of the storm, the betrayal, if true, would be a cruel twist in a life already marked by hardship and ambition. Let's take a trip back to one of the wildest and most intense chapters in hip-hop history, the infamous East Coast-West Coast rivalry. This wasn't just about music or who had the best beats. It became a larger-than-life cultural showdown that split the hip-hop world right down the middle. On one side, you had New York, home of the gritty, streetwise East Coast sound, with the notorious B.I.G. as its crown jewel, holding it down for Bad Boy Records. On the other side, you had Los Angeles, the heart of the West Coast sun-soaked gangster rap movement, led by the magnetic and fiery Tupac Shakur, repping Death Row Records. When these two collided, it was like tossing a lit match into a powder keg. It all started out as a mix of personal beefs and professional competition, but things got real ugly real fast. In '94, Tupac was shot at a New York studio, a moment he would later claim was a setup involving Biggie and his crew, though Biggie always denied it. That shooting was like the opening salvo in a war that would spill over into tracks, interviews, and straight-up confrontations. Diss songs like Tupac's infamous Hit 'Em Up and Biggie's subtle but sharp comebacks only poured gasoline on the fire. The media, loving the drama, played a major role in fanning the flames, framing it as this epic battle of coasts rather than a few dudes with serious grudges. But the craziest part? This wasn't just hype, it got real. People on both sides started taking the feud way too seriously, turning it into a climate of paranoia and violence. Then came the most heartbreaking twists. Tupac was gunned down in Vegas in '96. And just 6 months later, on March 9th, 1997, Biggie met the same tragic fate in Lake. Now, let's zoom in on the events of that fateful night. Biggie was in Los Angeles for the Soul Train Awards, but it wasn't all glitz and glamour. He had just wrapped up an after-party thrown by Vibe and Quest Best Records at the Peterson Automotive Museum. The place was so packed that the fire department shut it down, so Biggie and his crew decided to bounce back to their hotel. We were just partying and having fun. Puff asked for the bottles. How many bottles you got? Yo, bring me all the bottles you got. So he basically bought out the bar. The place was so full of smoke by midnight. Sounds like a chill, regular plan, right? But things went south fast. Biggie hopped into the front passenger seat of a GMC Suburban with Lil C and others in tow, while Diddy rolled behind them in another car with his bodyguards. By 12:45 a.m., as they cruised through the crowded streets, Biggie's SUV stopped at a red light. And then, this is where it all turns into a scene straight out of a nightmare. A black Chevrolet Impala pulls up beside them. The driver, described as a dude in a slick blue suit and bow tie, coolly rolls down his window, whips out a 9mm pistol, and starts blasting. I was behind Big in the passenger seat, talking to some females on the sidewalk, he recounts. Maybe like a second later, this Impala pulls up. 4 shots hit Biggie. His crew, panicked but determined, raced him to Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. They tried everything to save him, but at 1:15 a.m., doctors pronounced him dead. He was just 24 years old. Crazy for me, I think that's the first time I couldn't hold back my tears. It's the last thing I thought that Big would be dead, but it was. It was reality. It was real. Later, the autopsy revealed that out of the 4 bullets, it was the final one that offed him, ripping through his organs and lodging in his shoulder, a haunting detail that makes his death feel even more brutal. But here's where it gets murky. When you dig deeper, the story starts to sound less like a random act of violence and more like a setup. Lil C, Biggie's close friend and passenger that night, shared something that has people raising their eyebrows to this day. Apparently, as they were rolling through those crowded streets, Diddy's car made a split-second decision to run a red light, leaving Biggie's car behind, stopped and exposed. Walk us through those final moments, the interviewer asks. We get out. Puff pulls out first. We pull out behind him. He blows past the light. We stopped at the light. It's a detail that sparked endless speculation, especially when you consider the wider context of the East Coast-West Coast beef, the shady dealings in the industry, and the mounting paranoia Biggie reportedly felt in those final days. What was really going on that night? Was it just a tragic coincidence? Or was there something more calculated happening in the shadows? And how does that tie into the larger web of betrayal, rivalries, and power plays that defined that era of hip-hop? The questions linger, and the answers are as elusive as ever. But one thing's for sure. Biggie's death wasn't just the end of a life, it marked the end of an era in hip-hop, leaving behind a legacy that still feels both larger than life and heartbreakingly human. So here's the thing. What might look like a minor decision, like Diddy blowing through a red light that night, has left a lingering sense of suspicion, especially when you consider everything else that went down. It's hard not to wonder, was it just some split-second gut call, or did Diddy know something the rest of them didn't? Some folks are convinced it wasn't random at all, that he was trying to create distance between himself and what he may have known was coming. And then, when you add in those rumors about Biggie possibly leaving Bad Boy Records, well, things start to feel even more charged. Look at the balls he had, Deal says. He would and got his own records label, his own deal. Maybe there was more to this than just bad timing and worse luck. Gene Deal, Diddy's former bodyguard, didn't hold back when he spilled some tea during an interview. And honestly, what he said has everyone's gears turning. Deal questioned the whole purpose of Biggie even being in LA at that time. According to him, there wasn't any solid reason for Biggie to make that trip. He had no business in LA at that time. We all knew that. Why would Puff rent studio time? Come on, man. Look at what people do, man. You know, Pac just got killed. It ain't no kind of business Big was doing. Big couldn't even walk, he couldn't run. They were pushing him around in a wheelchair, brother. Then there's the issue with the cars that night, which Deal says raised even more red flags. Biggie's car was covered in stickers that only the Bad Boy Street team would have had access to. Diddy's car, on the other hand, was clean as a whistle, not a sticker in sight. I don't know if Big came over to Andre Harrell with that on his car, but Puff didn't have it on his car. So only one that has the opportunity, and only one that could have done that with somebody from the street team. If you're thinking this sounds sketchy, you're not alone. Deal's theory is that someone tampered with Biggie's ride, making it a target, and that the lack of stickers on Diddy's car was no accident. These little details pile up and start to look less like coincidence and more like intention. And that's not even the end of it. Deal says he recommended beefing up security that night, knowing how tense things were, but his suggestions were brushed off. I asked him before we were okay, we going to go out, hire some more security? They refused to hire more security. It's frustrating to hear, especially when you consider how everything played out. On top of that, Deal completely shut down the widely accepted narrative that Biggie's death was the result of a drive-by. According to him, the shooter's car wasn't moving at all, it was parked at the corner. That little detail flips the entire story on its head, making it sound more like a carefully planned hit than a random act of violence. Deal didn't mince words in that interview either. He straight up called out the lies and misinformation that have been circulating for years. They lie too much, he said, frustrated with how documentaries and stories have shaped the public's perception of that night. He was especially critical of people who weren't even there, but have somehow become the loudest voices in the conversation. There was no drive-by. The car was standing there at the corner. The stories they tell are not truthful. Deal added, the car was probably there all night. We talk about this all the time, bro. And the kicker? He believes that Carr had been sitting there waiting for most of the night. Deal's account of the actual shooting is nothing short of harrowing. He remembers trying to pull Biggie out of the car, knowing how dire the situation was. I saw this kid lose his life. This kid died while I was pulling him out of the car. I wouldn't put anybody in my shoes because I don't feel like they could handle it. I saw this kid lose his life. This kid died while I was pulling him out of the car. He had died, man. The weight of that night is something he carries with him to this day. He talked about how, before they even left Andre Harrell's house, Diddy told him he didn't have to go with them. But Deal had this gut feeling like something terrible was going to happen, and he couldn't shake it. He made sure Diddy was protected that night, but even so, Biggie didn't make it. And that's a burden Deal says he'll never stop carrying. The people that were bodyguarding Big didn't do everything in their power to stop it from being big, and that hurts me, Deal admitted. And really, how could it not be right there when something so devastating happens, knowing you tried to stop it but still couldn't? That kind of pain doesn't just fade away. Deal says it'll hurt until the day he dies. And honestly, you can feel the weight of that every time he talks about it. Biggie's legacy, though, is still alive and thriving in so many ways through his timeless music, the murals that decorate city walls, and even the statues built to honor him. But for people like Deal, who were there in those final moments, the loss is personal and raw. It's going to hurt until God takes me away from here, Deal said. And when you hear that, you realize that no matter how many years have passed, the pain of losing Biggie is still as real as it was that night. While the shadow of Biggie's tragic death continues to loom over Damon D. Rock Butler, it's also worth shining a light on his undeniable influence and enduring presence in the hip-hop world. Over the course of a 2-decade career, D-Rock has been in the mix with some of the biggest names in the game. From his brother-like bond with a notorious beat Dadachi, to playing a key role in shaping Lil' Kim as part of Junior Mafia, D-Rock has been a constant in the culture. Even today, he's respected and embraced by icons like Jay-Z, Nas, Fabulous, and others who always show him love for his contributions and loyalty. But D-Rock hasn't just been resting on past accolades, he's been building something new. Growing his Invisible Bully clothing brand into a recognizable name, and now venturing into the music world with his own label, Invisible Bully Music. While he's undoubtedly crossed paths with countless up-and-coming artists over the years, D-Rock took his time, waiting for that special talent to put his stamp on. And he found it in Chris Matomatic, a sharp lyricist hailing from Kingston, Jamaica, but raised in New Jersey and Brooklyn. Matic brings raw energy and authenticity to his craft. The label's debut release, Calories, is a lyrical knockout riding the beat from Cameron and Prodigy's classic Losing Weight. Matic described the track as a tribute to Prodigy, blending his own style with the spirit of the original, while delivering an intense personal freestyle that's as heavy with meaning as it is with wordplay. The video for Calories, shot in Brooklyn, offers a direct and gritty introduction to Matic. It's all real, he explained. No lies, no fabrications, just me, my life, and my neighborhood. It's that raw honesty that D-Rock seems to have recognized as the spark needed to lead the next wave in hip-hop. The world of hip-hop has no shortage of dark tales, betrayals, and unanswered questions, D-Rock's story included. But he's proven time and again that he's more than his past, carving out new chapters while staying true to the legacy he helped build. So, what do you think about D-Rock's journey from his days with Biggie to his current ventures? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for watching.